Well, again, hey, welcome to Connections Church. It's good to see everybody here today. And I'm excited to share the message with you today. And I brought an object lesson with me here. It is a small object lesson I brought here with me. And it might be kind of weird at first, but it'll make sense here in a moment. I brought a knife with me to church today. So if you see kids up front after service trying to play around on stage, shoo them off the stage because we don't want kids playing with the knife. But I brought a knife with me today. There's nothing special about this knife. I just grabbed it from the church kitchen and, nothing at all special about this knife. But I do have a reason for why I brought this knife with me. Knives have been around for hundreds, thousands of years, right? I mean, knives are a tool that we use almost on a daily basis. We use it to prepare our food and whatever else. We all probably use a knife on a daily basis. And it's interesting that the simple tool of a knife, it's been used for thousands of years for similar purposes, right? I mean, 3,000 years ago when Proverbs was written, knives were being used in that day as well for similar things that we still use them today. Now, the thing about a knife is that a knife can be used either to bring harm or to bring health. Like a knife can be used for good or a knife can be used for evil, right? Like in the hands of a violent criminal, or it doesn't have to be a violent criminal, it could be anybody for that matter, in the hands of someone that is planning to do evil and hurt someone, a knife can do great harm. A knife can even end someone's life. On the other hand, a knife has the power to bring health and restoration, does it not? Consider the power of a knife. Probably not this one, but the power of a knife in the hands of a skilled surgeon. Not long ago, I was talking with someone who had recently had a total hip replacement. And they were talking to me about the procedure they had done. After this remarkable procedure, the same day he was walking down the hallway in the hospital, didn't even stay overnight after that surgery. Like his surgeon restored function to his hip with the power of a knife. A knife can either bring great harm or a knife can bring great health. Andy, what are you talking about? You trying to sell us knives today? Might think I'm about to cut a penny or something like that. No, I'm not selling you a knife today. But similar to the power of a knife, there's great power in our words. There's great power in our speech. Our words can either give life or take life. Our words can either build up or our words can tear down. So today we're continuing a series in the Old Testament book of Proverbs. And this great book really speaks into so many practical areas of human behavior. And so today we're going to focus on the power of our words, the power of our words. Now, if you study Proverbs, what you'll discover is that particularly when you get to chapters 10 through 31, you'll discover a new wisdom saying, a proverb, in nearly every sentence. So each of these chapters might contain 10 to 15 different themes. And so in the second half of this Proverbs series, I'm going to be teaching the content more topically than going chapter by chapter. And today, I'll be jumping all over Proverbs, but we will spend most of our time in chapters 15 and 16. And really, the Bible, Old and New Testament, speaks very directly about the power of our words. Surely you're thinking of James chapter 3, if you're familiar with the Bible at all. James 3 is another potent passage teaching us about the power of our words. And it's fascinating to me that the problem we face with our mouths today really isn't that much different, probably not at all different, than the problem 3,000 years ago when these words were written. The thing is, we don't always use this gift of speech for good. Sometimes we use this gift of speech to destroy. So here's the big question for the message today. What should we know about the potent power of speech? What should we know about the potent power of speech? Our key verse for the day is Proverbs 15, verse 4, which says this: "The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit." And here what we see is this very simple core principle that either our words can bring life or our words can bring death. Interestingly, this idea that the tongue is a tree of life, it really reminds us appropriately of the creation language that we read in the book of Genesis. Indeed, the Lord created us in his image. And it's interesting that our ability to communicate is a crowning miracle of God's good creation. Think about it for just a moment. Communication, language, the complexity of languages in this world, it's a unique gift of God. And humans have been communicating forever. Even a 2-year-old can learn how to speak intelligible words and even understand the words of a parent. Obeying those words is a whole different matter. But this gift of communication is a remarkable gift of God. But this gift can be used to bring great harm or can be used to bring health. So again, what should we know about the potent power of speech? I've got 2 main ideas I'm going to share with you today. But fear not, I have 4 subpoints under each of those main ideas. So lots of scripture I'm going to share with you today, but we'll go through the message at a pretty good pace here today. So here's the first thing I want to share with you today. First main lesson, and I've already said it, but let me say it again. Our words can bring health. Our words can bring health. Like we know, I hope that all of you in the room have experienced how words can bring health and encouragement. I hope that you've experienced that in your life where maybe you were going through a difficult season and someone spoke to you a timely word of encouragement and you desperately needed it. Well, let's get more specific here. Proverbs offers us several specific examples of how our words can bring health. The first is this: words can bring peace. Words can bring peace. Proverbs 15:1 says this: "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." 15 verse 18, "A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel." It's fascinating. Our words have the power to calm a quarrel, to turn away wrath. Or, on the other hand, our words have the power to stir up conflict and dissension. That's a lot of power. Now, these couple verses we just read, they remind me of the simple idea of diplomacy. There's a reason why countries around the world have diplomats, people who can communicate with words with other countries to solve problems with words instead of wars. Likewise, the thoughtful and patient words of the godly can actually bring peace to a tense situation rather than stirring up more conflict. Words can bring peace. What else? How else can words bring health? Here's the second idea. Words can help restore. Words can help restore. Not only can your words bring peace, but your words can actually bring restoration among brokenness. Proverbs 25:12 says this, like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold is the rebuke of a wise judge to a listening ear. Now, I don't think anybody really enjoys, especially in the moment, being rebuked or corrected. I certainly don't. But when we look back on a moment of rebuke or being corrected, especially from someone that we love and respect, in hindsight, we can sort of learn to appreciate a thoughtful word of rebuke or correction from wise, godly people who love us and want to give us godly direction. These words are very similar to the Apostle Paul's words in the New Testament. Paul said this in Galatians 6:1. He said, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. Key word is probably gently in that verse. And really, think about it for a moment. That's difficult as a believer to fully comprehend the weight of responsibility that we have as mature believers to actually aid in someone else's spiritual restoration. But our words have the power to aid in spiritual restoration. That's powerful, powerful. On the flip side, your words could be used as a pretext for someone to exit the church and not return for decades. Third lesson here about how our words can bring health. Words can instruct. Words can instruct. Chapter 16, verse 21 says this, the wise in heart are called discerning, and gracious words promote instruction. 15, verse 7a says, the lips of the wise spread knowledge. Our words can and should provide instruction. Now it's interesting, this idea here in verse 15:7, this idea of spreading knowledge carries with it the image of spreading seed, like a farmer would spread seed. Our words can spread instruction like a farmer would go out and spread seed in fertile soil. For example, as a parent, like you might think that your kids are never listening, and probably sometimes they aren't listening. But over the course of a lifetime, your kids are listening. Again, obedience is another matter altogether, but they are listening. And that's true for your friends or your colleagues, or your family members or your neighbors. They are listening. Your words, my words, are spreading seeds of instruction. So let's be sure that our words are spreading good, godly seeds of instruction. Let me share with you one more way in which our words can bring health. This is not an exhaustive list today, by the way. Last one I want to share with you today, though, is this. Words can encourage. Words can encourage. 15:23 says this, a person finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word. 16:24, gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. I've shared with you many times about how I am a sucker for sweets. Ironically, I don't like suckers, but with most other sweets, I'm all in, except for ginger anything ginger related. Gingerbread cookies, blech, I just don't understand. Put it in something else, I don't know, whatever. Just kidding. If you like gingerbread cookie stuff, whatever, that's great. I love sweets. But it's interesting, we sort of lose sight of this, but back when these words were written 3,000 years ago, ice cream didn't exist, which just seems like a travesty. Amen. That's right. Honeycomb, however, not honeycombs, those are so good, by the way, but honeycomb was a sweet treat in that day. Like a famished company of soldiers at war might stumble upon honeycomb, and it was a sweet treat of refreshment, sort of like an ice cream cone on a 90-degree day. Probably a little bit different than that, but similar. And likewise, a gracious, timely word of encouragement is a sweet treat to someone who is walking through a season of discouragement, difficulty, depression. Let me share with you just a personal story here quickly. Like everybody, I experience seasons of discouragement. And I won't go into great detail, but I'll just share with you that, hey, the last 3 years for me have been mostly good, all right? But I'll be honest with you, I've experienced pockets, seasons of discouragement. We moved here to Billings from Cheyenne, Wyoming. We moved from a much different, larger, healthy church. And we moved here to restart this church. And I got to tell you, I've never, I've been a pastor for 15 years now, but I've never started a church. So that's been a new experience. And I've never been a senior pastor until the last 3 years. That's been a new experience. And those experiences have been, for the most part, good. But there, as you can imagine, there have been seasons of discouragement. Just like all of us experience seasons of discouragement. Maybe you are walking through a season of discouragement today. But I just have to tell you that, like, amid my seasons of discouragement, the Lord has been so faithful to bring pastoral mentors, probably a dozen of them, into my life at different times, different contexts, and they have spoken timely words of encouragement. Now, I'm sure you have your own examples of seasons in which you've been walking through a hard season, whatever that season might be, but you've probably experienced before when a thoughtful, caring person in your life spoke a timely word of encouragement. And I got to tell you, it really can be a game changer. And so, what I've been praying for today in this message, I've been praying that we would think of specific names, that names of people would come to our hearts and minds today. Maybe you're thinking of somebody right now in your life that is walking through a tough season. And sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you, but it's happened to me before, where sometimes I'll think of someone that I know is going through a tough season. And I'll think, boy, I need to reach out to XYZ person, offer a word of encouragement. But sometimes we stop short of actually doing that. We think about it, but sometimes we don't actually do it. We get busy, we get caught up in whatever else. And let me just say, don't wait. Don't wait. Reach out as soon as possible and offer that word of encouragement. Why? Because our words can bring health. Your words are more powerful than you realize. They really are. Second big lesson for today is this: our words can bring harm. Our words can bring harm. Now remember, we talked about the knife. The knife in the hands of a skilled surgeon can bring health, but a knife in the hands of someone who is preparing to do harm to another can bring great harm and destruction. Church, our words have so much power. And even without meaning to, our words can do so much damage. I mean, we can probably all think of damaging words spoken to us, maybe spoken decades ago, that we can still remember. And we can still remember how it crushed our spirit. So let's focus in here on a few ways in which our words can bring harm, particularly that the book of Proverbs teaches us. The first is this: lying words bring harm. Lying words bring harm. Proverbs 12:22 says, "The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy." We live in a day and age in which truth is now considered to be relative. Many people believe and have that view that truth is relative. Many people, I don't believe this, but many people believe that you get to decide what truth is, that truth is sort of based on your feelings and your opinions. But playing fast and loose with the truth is only going to create greater harm and destruction. In my study this week, I really appreciated what Dr. Warren Wiersbe, commentator, said about this passage about lying words. He said this: "When words can't be trusted, then society starts to fall apart. Contracts are useless, promises are vain, the judicial system becomes a farce, and all personal relationships are suspect." So let me just say, contrary to what many people believe, truth does matter. Truth matters. Many of the problems that we face in our society today are the result of a redefining of truth. Case in point, we don't always like what we see when we look honestly in the mirror about our shortcomings. I'm not just talking about physical shortcomings, but when we look in the mirror and we honestly look at the shortcomings we experience, we don't always like what we see, but let me just say that until we are willing to look at the truth of whatever the problem is in our lives, we're not serious about fixing that problem. Second lesson here I want to share with you is this: flattering words bring harm. Flattering words bring harm. Now, maybe we wouldn't think of flattery as that big of a deal. But in truth, flattery becomes a form of lying that can be a very wicked form of seduction. 26 verse 28 says this: "A lying tongue hates those it hurts, and a flattering mouth works ruin." Probably a month or two ago, when we were studying the first, half dozen chapters of Proverbs, I think it was Proverbs chapter 6, if I remember correctly. But we studied a text that talked about the way of the immoral woman. Now, most likely the text there is referring to a prostitute. And what we saw there in that text is that this immoral woman used words of flattery to seduce a young man into sexual sin. Likewise, we often fall into the trap of flattery. We like to hear words of flattery. And sometimes we speak words of flattery in an effort to get something from people that we want to get something from them. I will never forget, probably, 12, 13 years ago, I was at a pastor's conference thing down in Colorado Springs. I think it was at New Life Church. And the pastor's name was Brady Boyd, Pastor Brady Boyd. I don't even remember what the message was about, but I'll never forget this bit of advice that he gave to a group of pastors, but I think it holds true for all people. He simply made the recommendation. He said, hey, you know what? You shouldn't spend too much time with people who think too little of you, and you shouldn't spend too much time with people who think too much of you. That always stuck with me. Isn't that good? We should be weary of spending too much time with people who think too little of us. That's problematic. It's unhealthy. But we should also, especially for anybody in any form of leadership, we should be weary of spending too much time with people who think too much of us. Like, you need some people in your life that are not impressed with you. People who really know your shortcomings and still love you, right? Third lesson is this: words without thought bring harm. Words without thought bring harm. Yet again, I'm surprised by the sheer practicality of Proverbs. Too often, we speak before we think, right? Speak before we think. 15:28 says this: the heart of the righteous weighs its answers. Isn't that good? Weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil. I don't know about you, but there's at least some sense of encouragement here. Learning that know-it-alls and opinionated, ignorant people existed 3,000 years ago, just like they exist today. It's a little bit encouraging. We could save ourselves loads of problems if we would just take the time to think before we speak. And let me just say that in the age of unlimited connection, the age of social media, the platform for know-it-alls and ignorant, opinionated people has only grown larger. That's probably not changing. Quite simply, we gotta slow down. Slow down. Think before we speak. Slow down. Think before you tweet. Slow down. Think before you post whatever it is you're going to post. Think about it. Really consider the weight of your words. You can't take those words back. And in the age of social media in which we exist, sometimes those words will be cataloged forever. And they could still come back to haunt you 10 years from now. Think before you speak. I've saved perhaps the most potent and damaging form of communication for last. Last lesson I want to share with you today is this: gossiping words bring harm. 11 verse 13 says this: a gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret. 26 verse 20. I love this verse. Without wood, a fire goes out. Without a gossip, a quarrel dies down. Talk about an image. Especially in the middle of summer, it's campfire season. I love campfire season. Without fail, gossipers are at the heart of every conflict. And for thousands of years, this has been true. For thousands of years, refusing to shut our mouths and or refusing to just go talk to someone directly that you have a problem with, well, that's been creating conflict and dissension. And the picture painted here of this campfire is illuminating. If you remove a log from the fire will die down. But if you keep feeding that fire with more logs, if you keep pouring more fuel on that fire, it might be fun, but it's going to blow up, right? If you keep putting logs in that fire, it's going to keep on burning, and so it is with gossip, says Proverbs. Running our mouths will fuel the fire of conflict. Just keep it going. Keep it going. Exercising the discipline of silence. We could probably all use some of that, could we not? Exercise the discipline of silence. Or maybe the harder one, probably the harder one. Exercising the discipline of direct communication. It will starve the fire of conflict. It will. It will serve as a fire extinguisher of conflict and dissension and gossip. Let me say it this way, church, if we do not have the guts to talk with someone directly, we should probably just shut our mouths. Furthermore, airing grievances on social media does not solve problems. It just fuels the fire. And I know that because I'm part of a Facebook HOA group. You're laughing because you know it too. It doesn't solve problems. It fuels a fire. Fuels the fire. Now I know that that's how the world handles problems. We're too afraid to go have a conversation, a courageous conversation. But the people of God don't handle conflict. They shouldn't handle conflict through social media, text, email, and so forth. Go talk to the person. Give them a call. You can, I'm telling you, the emails I've received as a pastor through email, or the conflict and the complaints that I've received through email as a pastor, just crazy. From people that would never talk that way one-on-one. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so, you know what, I'll tell you this, I'll give you this for free. If I ever receive an anonymous note from anybody, you know where I put it? Trash can. Trash can. And you should too. You should too. Don't listen to that. And we get so worked up, especially now that social media exists, we get so worked up about what somebody said or what somebody thinks about us that lives on the other side of the country. It ruins our week. And if we would just kind of go back to some of this basic teaching, talk to people directly. Don't gossip. Take the log out of the fire, and that fire will die down. We have a lot we can learn from this passage. I'll close with a quick story here. So my wife, Aubrey, is undoubtedly the person who impresses me most in my life. And I'm not just saying that to earn points with my wife. I really mean that. I'm impressed with her so often. Well, probably, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe something like that, we lived in a different community. She worked in a different job. We lived in a different state. And she had these coworkers in her job that were just notorious for gossiping. You'd get into the lunchroom, and these particular coworkers would just start up the gossiping, and talking about other coworkers, talking about how terrible the boss was, because the boss is always terrible, no matter what. And she struggled with it. Like, how do I manage this? How do I handle this? Because she didn't want to hear it, and she also didn't want to be tempted to join in on the gossip either. And I'll never forget, like, she devised the most brilliant plan to deal with the gossiping. I've always thought it was just brilliant. When coworkers would start gossiping, she would do one of two things. Either she would say something complimentary about the person they were gossiping about, because it's hard to gossip about someone when somebody else is like, yeah, but, they do this so great over here, like they're doing this really well, or like, I don't think they meant that, or whatever. Like, she just say something complimentary about them, and it would have a way of kind of extinguishing the problem. So she'd either do that, or she would just change the subject. And she got really good at just changing the subject, or just kind of walking away or something like that. And so in my mind, I never experienced it firsthand, but in my mind, I always pictured how this goes down, in the break room, and they start gossiping and complaining, and maybe they say something like, can you believe what so-and-so did? Can you believe what our boss did? They're just the worst. They kind of look over at Aubrey, waiting for a response. She's just eating her lunch. She might just say something like, I don't know about that, but this Coke Zero Vanilla is delicious. Oh my gosh. It just always cracks me up. I thought that is fantastic. And the reason I tell you that story is just because what I know about Aubrey and that particular work environment over the course of, a couple of years is that the gossipers sort of learned over time that they weren't going to find an audience in Aubrey. She'd either walk away, change subject, say something complimentary, something like that. She served as a fire extinguisher of sorts. And I believe that's the kind of thing, as the people of God, that's how we should be operating with our words or with our silence. Church, our words are powerful. They have power to harm or power to bring health. So I want to take just a couple minutes at the end of the service here to just reflect and pray and really think through, Lord, how do my words impact the people around me? So Pastor Vin's going to come up here and just play here for a couple of moments here. And as he plays, I just invite you to take a moment to pray, just a minute or two. I just want you to pray and reflect about your words. I put some note cards on your seat today. And what I want for you to do is I want you to think about some particular people, or maybe it's several people that the Lord is placing on your heart and mind today that gosh, I need to reach out with a word of encouragement or maybe a word of apology. But I bet, I have a sneaky suspicion that the Spirit of God has already been speaking to your heart and mind, and maybe a name has come to mind, and gosh, I need to reach out to this person to share a word of encouragement. Or I need to reach out to this person with an apology. You don't need to write a whole note out to them right now, but you could just write their name on that note card. Take that note card with you. Maybe you send them a note, or maybe you give them a call, or go meet them for coffee and just give them a word of encouragement. So let's just take a minute to pray, to invite the Lord to challenge and to direct our words. Let's take a minute to pray and commit our words to the Lord.